As we sink into our sofas, in our cosy homes, out there in the inky blackness on the banks of the River Ness, something stirs. Not one, not two, but three, a family of otters in our infrared light. Just look at that. We spotted this within the hour, and we really wanted to share it with you. You can keep your eyes on those cameras from 10 to 10 every day, but we'd much rather now that you keep your eyes on WinterWatch. So stick with us for our main programme. It's WinterWatch. Hello and welcome to WinterWatch 2021, and look, no rain, no wind, it's dry, it's chilly, but it's not like it was last night. Now, if you've been watching our first few programmes, you'll know that we've changed our mission slightly. We're not only aiming to bring you the very best of British wildlife this winter, but we want to put a smile on your face and cheer you up with some of that natural beauty of nature. And today we're going to be taking a look at animal homes. Yes, we're going to bring their homes into yours. And last night, those animals that were active down here in the New Forest were very much in need of a home. It was pouring with rain and very windy, and as you can see, they were, well, some of them struggling with it. Now, the badgers, with their thick coat, of course, they weren't too perturbed. They could put up with that because it gave them an opportunity to go foraging for earthworms. The worms love the wet, of course, but the little mouse, munching away inside the shelter of the log. And those starlings, look at them, all huddled together under Aberystwyth Pier, close together, conserving what energy they can. Fantastic stuff. And I'm pleased to say that we can now go live to one of our cameras, because tonight, out of its set has emerged one of our badgers. Look at this. So this is live here in the New Forest. In fact, there's two. Look, there's another one behind it there. We've got this low-angle view of these animals that have just emerged from their home, their set. Look at that. I love all these views, those of the otters, those of the badgers. We're sort of exposing the secrecy of the night, aren't we? Sticking our noses into their business, but in a very unobtrusive way, because none of these animals knows, of course, that we are anywhere near them. But what are those starlings, though? Like so many birds, they're using a man-made structure, but most birds that go to roost actually just find natural structures to hide away. But there are some that actually build their own roosting sites. Take a look at this. This is a shot that was sent to us by Charles Cuthbert, and it shows you a Wellingtonia, a redwood tree. These were popularly planted in Victorian times, and now they've grown to some stature. But let's go closer. Closer here. What can you see? A fluffy little backside and a stripe pointing down of a tail. This is a tree creeper, and the tree creeper has excavated its depression in this friable bark, and every night they will come back to the same spot. They'll stick their beaks and their heads into it, fluff up their backsides, point their tail down, and remain perfectly still, hiding away there overnight. Now, obviously, we only imported these trees in the 1800s. Up until that time, they will probably be using rotten wood in other species of trees, but they've adapted to that. And of course, during the daytime as well, when it's cold, the tree creeper will fluff itself up, as John Waters' photographs from Devon show you here. Look at these plump little tree creepers looking like ping pong balls out there. But when it comes to hiding away in the trees, I'd like to show you something now. It's going to test your eyesight. You've got to try and spot these. Amanda Hunter in Devon sent us this. It looks like a load of old dead leaves. It is a load of old dead leaves, but what's in amongst them? See if you can spot it. Look at that. The degree of camouflage is absolutely astonishing. These are comma butterflies, and they're one of a few species that we have in the UK that overwinter as adults. Look at them. Look at this last one. Look, see that hint of green, which matches the algae on the tree? astonishing, isn't it? And what's interesting is that Amanda spotted them hibernating in the same place in 2018. Now, it's obviously not the same butterflies that have come back, and they certainly haven't taught their offspring. So it's obviously just a very suitable place for them to hibernate. But what a fabulous sighting. Amanda, thanks very much for that indeed. And if any of you spot anything on your winter walks whilst you're out there, we would love to see it. Do please send us to us. Distribution of the comma here. Interesting, the comma butterfly. An enormous decline in the 20th century, and then look, it's bounced back. It was confined to the south of England, where its larvae were feeding largely on hops that were grown for beer flavouring, and also wild hops, but the beer flavouring hops have disappeared, and so have a lot of our wild hops. So how have they managed to spread all the way up here? Well, they kind of switched their diet, the larvae. They switched to eating nettles. And that meant that they were able to take advantage of a food plant that appears all over the UK. Now, quite a few of our butterflies are changing their distribution due to climate change. And what we see here is a combination of factors. The warmer, wetter weather is favouring them, but they couldn't have spread here had they not switched their diet. But it's a good news story about butterflies. And but if you can spot them out in the woods, I mean, I'll give you £1. I'm not a gambling man. You know, I'm normally quite tight. But if you can spot one of those, as Amanda did out in the woods, I mean, it's not something that I've ever found. Let's join Gillian now. She's down here in the West Country. She's at the Cornwall Beaver Project. Gillian, I've got to ask you, but I predict the answer, and I'm sure the same would be for Iolo. You've never found one of those butterflies like that, have you?
I'll tell you what, you'd be hard-pressed. They're amazing camouflage, aren't they? But yes, I am at Cornwall Beaver Project, and later on in the programme we're going to be looking at how beavers, they use trees to build their shelters in quite a different way. But first of all, let's take a look at this. This was sent in by David Abraham from Motherwell in Scotland. Now this is, look at it, it's a tawny owl in its daytime roost using a tree for shelter. But just look at how it catches your gaze. What a magnificent animal. Absolutely beautiful, lovely. Thanks so much for sending that in. Now, of course, we've got a man who likes his bird in Wales. That's Iolo Williams at the Centre for Alternative Technology.
Yes, indeed, Gillian. And up here in Wales, it's all about wrens, wrens and more wrens. Have a look at these photos. These were sent to us by Morwenna Broscott up on the Llŷn Peninsula, and she hung out some felted pods. And immediately, some wrens took up residence. That's their winter home in there. Doesn't that look stunning? Not one or two, but 6 crammed in. You really wouldn't want to be the wren at the bottom, would you? But actually, it's a good technique, because if it gets really cold, inside there, it's going to be significantly warmer than outside. And Morwenna, if you can put together a 6-foot felted pod, then please send it down to me. It's freezing here. Chris, back to you.
I think if you've got felted pods, you want to keep them out of the freezing weather, to be quite honest with you, Iolo. But if you do capture any of those sites, as I just mentioned earlier, do send them to us. Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, whether they're still photographs or little videos you captured on your phone, we would love to see them. And of course, we've got our live cameras, which you can keep your eyes on from 10 o'clock in the morning until 10 p.m. at night. And look, you can see they're live at the moment, the badgers and the mouse. And the starlings. I mean, there's so much activity on these cameras. Well, don't be tempted to go to them now. Stick with us for the programme. There's plenty of time when we finish, and more time throughout the course of the day tomorrow. Now, like many of you, I'm sure, I like a bit of history, sometimes mixed with my natural history. And I'm not alone there. Richard Taylor-Jones, one of our cameramen, likes that as well. And he's been out to his local patch. It's a place which has got plenty of old human history, but now the natural history has taken over in what I can only describe as an explosive way.
There is a corner of Kent that I love to explore. A stretch of the River Swale, which has undergone a remarkable transformation. For years, this was the bustling industrial heartland of gunpowder factories. But a factory that created tools of destruction eventually destroyed itself. In 1916, there was a huge explosion, at least 108 men and boys sadly lost their lives, and the factory never recovered. The industry vanished and nature started to take over. Today, it's now the Oare Marshes Nature Reserve, which is run by the Kent Wildlife Trust. The factory fires have long since been extinguished. But in the morning sun, reed beds stand like burning torches, a perfect perch for a sensational specialist, the bearded tit. I have to say, it's rather more of a moustache than a beard, but they certainly are very much the gentlemen of the reed beds. The males, that is. The females don't have that lovely black moustache at all. And whilst other songbirds would leave the reed bed at this time of year, bearded tits choose to stay because they're able to change their diet. In the summer months and the spring, they'll be feeding on insects, but now they're after the seeds of the reeds. In days gone by, gunpowder would have been exported from here and used across the world. But now the area attracts imports instead. There's one particular bird that I'm quite interested in, and that's the black-tailed godwit. There's a small group of them just roosting on the island in front of me here. They'll have probably come all the way from Iceland to escape the cold winter up there and enjoy our warmer climate. Fascinating birds because the bills, whilst they look the same between the males and the females, they're ever so slightly different. Females and males have different beak lengths. The females are noticeably longer. Because of this, the sexes don't compete for food as they search different layers of mud for prey. Of course, with all these wading birds around and the ducks, it's not surprising that there are things that like to eat them. And just up on one of the big pylons here, I've noticed a peregrine falcon's landed. And it's pulling apart some poor bird that it's managed to catch for lunch. Oh, yeah, loads of feathers coming off now. Carnivore confetti is what I like to call it. When you see all the feathers drifting off in the wind as a peregrine's tucking into its lunch. Just goes to show you that when a nature reserve is successful in bringing in birds like godwits and lapwing and ducks that we've seen, that the result is that it will then in turn bring in exciting predators like this. Beyond the river creeks and the scrape lie the wet grasslands, where workmen's boots have been replaced by the heavy hooves of herbivores. A herd of Sussex cattle. These grazing gardeners suppress plants like bramble and scrub, clearing the way for other wildlife to take advantage. And a silent survey of their hard work is taking place. So the kestrel is up here above me in that very recognisable hover that it does, with a lovely tail splayed out, wings beating furiously, but of course its head staying perfectly still as it's looking for the mice and the voles below in this grassland. The gunpowder works may be long gone, but the battlefield of the natural world is in full force, and the loss of one life sustains another. Oare Marshes is living, breathing proof of how nature can rise like a phoenix from the flames and breathe new life into landscapes left empty by us.
I absolutely love how wildlife is able to reclaim those post-industrial sites. And there are pockets of those in almost all of our cities. So areas like that are really good places to go if you're on your daily walk to try and spot some wildlife. Now, just a little over a week ago, we sent one of our camera team to Bristol to go and sit out at a stretch of the river, the Avon River, called the New Cut. Now, as the city was waking up, he saw these really primeval birds waking up in that early light along with the city. Now, these are cormorants. They are coastal birds, but they can also be found on inland reservoirs, along rivers, just like they are here in Bristol. And they're silhouetted in that early morning light. They look kind of sluggish and almost sinister. But these birds really come into their own when they go into the water. They're supreme fishes. They can dive to 10 meters and they can stay submerged, actively searching out their prey, which when they find them, they'll use that long hook-tip bill to catch their prey. So amazing hunters. But come the afternoon, the day's work is done, and now is the all-important time to rest, digest, and hang out. And I mean literally, because they hang their wings out to dry. They're known to lack the oil in their feathers. They actually do have preening glands, but the edges of the feathers are very wettable. That allows them to dive, so they must keep those in good condition. And then this one here, interestingly, is starting to show some of its breeding plumage. So that is quite an encouraging sign. That is the first sign of spring. Now, with the city as a backdrop, these birds have made themselves quite at home. So, like I said, you could go out on your daily walk, possibly see these, and if you do, take some photos, send your videos in to us using the WinterWatch list, use the hashtag there, and that's a way to get your photos to us, because we'd love to see them, love to share them with our viewers as well. So another bird that you can see on your daily walk isn't, well, let's say it's the polar opposite of that sleek, black, elegant cormorant. Now this bird is dressed for carnival, and this is what it looks like. This is a male mandarin duck. Like I said, he's dressed for carnival, very showy, but the female is much more subtle. The female doesn't need to impress. So let's take a look at what the female looks like. There she is next to the male. Now she doesn't need to impress anyone. All she needs to do is stay hidden, especially when she's on the nest in the spring, later in the year. So I've got a feather here. I don't know if you can see that. That's from a male mandarin. Now these birds originate from the Far East, as the name would suggest. They were brought here by collectors in the 18th century, in the middle of the 18th century, but by the 1930s, several of them had escaped these wildfowl collections. So it's now estimated that there are up to 8,000 birds that are now breeding in the UK. And those 8,000 birds are really important because there are actually more birds here now than in their original range in the Far East, where they're in sharp decline. So the UK has actually become a bit of a stronghold for them. So when I was on Autumn Watch, I was based up in South Yorkshire, and that was one place where I was hoping to see mandarins. I didn't get a chance to see them, but our camera team went up to Sheffield a few weeks back, and they were able to see some of these mandarin ducks where they've made themselves quite at home.
Encliffe Park is a popular place for people to take their rationed exercise at the moment. But if the joggers and dog walkers keep their eyes peeled, they may be lucky and catch a glimpse of this secretive bird. Mandarin ducks are generally shy, often hiding in the reeds or under hanging willow trees. But there are also ducks with a penchant for the high life. Look up, and they might well be looking down on you. They're amazingly agile and can easily negotiate a flyby through woodland. Right now, in midwinter, the males are looking their very best. That strident, colourful plumage having played a significant role in securing a mate. This couple will have been together since autumn, and they have a reputation for loyalty. Traditionally, in Chinese culture, mandarins are believed to be lifelong couples, although this isn't necessarily true. However, they're still regarded as a symbol of affection and fidelity and are frequently featured in Asian art. Courtship is ritualized, with the male fluffing up feathers around the head, plus lots of preening and washing to look good. They're getting frisky, and there's even some mating behavior when a female adopts a receptive pose. But at this stage, it's just for fun. They're practicing for the main event in spring. And with numbers dropping in their native homes in the Far East, every duck born here has a significance for the species globally.
Oh, that male mandarin duck really is a stonker and a beautiful looking thing. Now, as you know, I love my birds, and I'm going to be talking about winged creatures tonight. Not birds, but insects. I wonder how many of you, like me, have got some of these up in your garden. It's a bug hotel, a small and bijou, but very effective. They're fantastic, all these little nooks and crannies. I looked in mine just the other week. Lacewings, ladybirds, earwigs, all kinds of insects and other invertebrates in there. I've also got 2 bee hotels that contain just these hollow bamboos here, and they are brilliant for solitary bees. The bees will build little cells inside, they'll seal them off, they'll put food in there, usually pollen and nectar, they'll lay an egg, and the egg hatches out into a little larva, and this is the winter home for these larvae. And even in winter, you can go and look at them, and you can identify which bee has used it just by looking at the front door, looking at what substance has been used to seal these holes. I'll give you a little example of 4 of them here. Now, don't worry, this isn't actual size. You haven't got 2-foot-long bees going around killing next door's cat. We've just built this now. Now, you might have one with resin at the entrance there. Well, that is likely to be the large-headed resin bee. They've got fantastic names, haven't they, these bees? Now, no one knows exactly where they get the resin from. Probably the sap of a tree. Who knows? Then the next one, it might have a leaf blocking the entrance like this. This is going to be the leaf cutter bee. These are brilliant little bees. They cut little round holes in leaves, carry them, they build little cigar-like cells inside, then they seal it off with a leaf. And then this one, if it's kind of solidified mud, it's likely to be a red mason bee. Now, in spring, this is the commonest solitary bee in my garden. They're beautiful little things as well. And the final one, this one here, is going to be a relative of the red mason bee, the blue mason bee. And this one has blocked the hole with masticated leaves. Isn't that fantastic? So it'd be worth your while popping out, having a look if you've got a little bee hotel like this. And who knows, you may well be able to identify exactly who is inside there. And please, please, please help your bees. Plant flowers that'll flower throughout the year. They need the pollen, they need the nectar. Now, we're based here at the Centre for Alternative Technology, of course, and it's an old slate quarry. And part of that is a long, dark tunnel. And I thought, wouldn't it be brilliant to pop in there and see which creatures have set up their winter homes inside? And that is exactly what I did last week. I'm on my way to a tunnel that was once a really important part of this quarry. It was blasted out using dynamite about 170 years ago. And although the quarrymen have moved out, I'm hoping to find signs that wildlife has moved in. Just like an underground treasure hunt. You never know what you're going to see next. Oh, wow. Look at this. I've got an egg sac of a cave spider hanging down from the roof of the tunnel here like a bit of cotton wool. That is seriously cool. And right next to it, look over here. Just come back half a step and we've got a herald moth. Now this is one of those moths that'll overwinter as an adult in caves, in tunnels, in cellars. It's kind of camouflaged like a dead leaf because it's a woodland moth. And you can even see condensation on its wing there. That is really nice. Oh, here we are. And this is the cave spider. And the reason they're in here is because they know that some insects will come and overwinter in a tunnel like this. And there is enough food to sustain it all year round in here. Now these holes, these were created so they could put dynamite in there to blast out this tunnel. And interestingly, this is where a lot of the creatures are hiding, tucked out of the way. So we're going to use a very specialist piece of equipment to get close-up views of them. This is called a probe lens. And what we can do is we can put these right inside these holes there to get a far better view of what's inside. Oh, look at this. This is really nice. There's about, I would say, probably half a dozen hoverflies sheltering in there. I think they're drone flies. It's quite a common hoverfly. And what they've done is they've come in here, they've crammed into that hole out of the way over the winter, and they've gone into a torpor. And the reason they're here is because the temperature's cold, but it's constant. If it warmed up in here, they would warm up, they'd wake up, they'd fly around, they'd find there's no food for them in winter. And so they'd waste a lot of energy, but because it's cool and constant, they remain in that torpor. There's another moth just tucked away in here, see it? Fairly well camouflaged, that one as well. And I got to be honest with you, I've not got a clue what that moth is. Wow, what an amazing place. Dozens and dozens of little creatures just tucked away in there for the winter. But I've got to say, it is pretty cold in there. So I'm going to head off now and have a cup of tea. Well, you'll be very pleased to hear I did get my cup of tea and I had a lovely moist Victoria sponge cake. Cracking it was too. Oh, and the moth as well, of course, I forgot. I phoned a good friend of mine, Luke Phillips, who told me it's a tissue moth. Now, I should have known that because the tissue moth is one of those moths that overwinters as an adult in tunnels and in caves. So, Luke, thank you very much for putting me straight there. Now, Chris and Meg's down in the New Forest. There aren't any caves or tunnels down there, are there?
We've got some tunnels.
A couple of tunnels, not many caves that I know of.
We got in Hampshire, we've got the Grey Whale Tunnel, which is very famous for its bats, and a couple of other tunnels, but not any caves, no. We're not very good at troglodyting down here. We'll leave that to the Welsh, troglodyting.
Now, of course, we have our live cameras scattered throughout the nation, and some of our most amazing shots have come from the River Ness up in Scotland. Have a look at this goosander that we saw earlier in that thick snow. Now, this is a species which is also known as sawbill because it has serrated edges around its bill. It enables it to better catch fish which are slippery and to swallow them whole like it does with ease here. Look at that.
Goodness me, that's a meal, isn't it?
It is a meal. It's a meal and a half, that one. And of course, our otters too. It's amazing to get a close-up vision of an otter, isn't it? It's very rare that you get to see them like this.
See all the detail there, can't you?
I know. All that wet, thick, dense fur as it's scoffing on a fish there, enjoying its meal. Look at that.
Look at the teeth.
Those jaws as well. Quite powerful jaws otters have.
But very sharp teeth.
Very sharp teeth.
For cutting through that flesh. We were watching our badgers live here from the New Forest earlier, but we've been keeping a keen eye on this family since WinterWatch, actually. And it's heartening to see that so many of those cubs have made it through the summer and now the autumn and into the winter as well. And there's been plenty of activity.
Look at these little noses. How cute is that? These are cubs, so these are from last year, and you can tell that because they've got very pristine, clean faces. But now you can see them actually engaging in play fighting. Now they're learning about one another's social dominance, which is of course incredibly important within these clans of badgers. So they're just kind of play fighting here, and this is something called rump biting, where the other mounts on top of the other one, biting onto its rump, giving it a little twist and turn and letting go. And here again, you can see it upscaled slightly here, with these two badgers engaging in a little bit of altercation as well. But there is something pretty remarkable that's about to happen, a feature of the badger, which is very characteristic that they do when they're fighting. You can hear them as well. Have a listen.
They're arguing over food.
They're arguing over food, absolutely.
Two cubs.
Of course, two cubs. And when you look very closely, you can see this. Now this is piloerection, and what that means is the guard hairs on the badger stand up on end, making it look bigger than it actually is and therefore more intimidating, which is quite remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, look at that one. It looks big, almost like a hedgehog.
It's
a hedgehog
spiky
badger.
It's a hedgehog badger.
But we've got to be clear, this is two of this year's cubs growing into adults, having a bit of bicker about food.
Yeah.
That's not full-on badger aggression.
No. And there is clips that we have seen where it's a little bit more aggression going on. Now this is an adult male, a boar if you like, actually having a bit of a go at one of the cubs. Take a listen. You can see there that piloerection standing up and those very characteristic calls as well. Something really unusual to see. Now, often when badgers do engage in fighting, it's not so much over food. That's not where you see the most fatal fights occur. It's often over territory or when the clan becomes overcrowded, and then that can cause dispersal. But dispersal doesn't normally happen at this time of year. It's normally around April or September. Look at this.
I think the big male is just teaching the younger animals who's got first rights to the food.
Absolutely.
To be quite honest with you. Mind you, in the end, look, they all go off in a fairly amicable way. And I have to say, I have had the opportunity to witness a full-on badger fight between animals from opposing clans. And it's on another level. It really is extraordinarily noisy and very, very violent, and you fear that the animals are going to seriously injure themselves, and they're capable of that.
Yeah.
And I can show you this skull. I've always got a badger skull in my pocket, of course. And this is the skull of a badger. The first thing to see, you can say, is the articulated jaw. Now, most mammal jawbones, including our own, would drop off from the skull, but they're firmly rooted to that. And the second thing is this here. This is the sagittal crest. This ridge of bone is to attach a muscle on here, which goes down beneath the orbital arch and then attaches itself to this part of the jaw, and it's huge, and it gives the badger a phenomenal biting ability. And then, of course, at the front, you've got these. Well, this is an old animal. They would have been very sharp canine teeth here. And I've heard it said that if you were, I don't know why you would, of course, put your finger in a badger's mouth, they would easily be able to sever your finger, such as the strength of their jaw. Why do they have such powerful jaws? Well, it's not to actually fight one another. It's probably because they had to share their space with wolves and bears and lynx up until fairly recently, and they would have needed to fight them off.
Some fantastic behaviour there, and of course you can keep up to date with our live cameras on the website from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Now, it's fantastic, of course, to see our badgers' homes, but I'm really curious about how those beavers are getting on. So let's go down to Cornwall to see Gillian.
Well, I'm glad to say there isn't any fighting. Yeah, it's only day 3, so give us time. But yes, we are at Woodland Valley Farm at Cornwall Beaver Project, and we have been following the fortunes of the family, the beaver family that have established themselves in the enclosure down in the valley. There's 7 individuals. And of course, tonight we're looking at all the structures that they build to create the home that is beaver territory. So let's take a look over here, because we've got a little bit of a diagram to help demonstrate and illustrate the point. So here's the dam, and you can see that they drive these large branches into the mud. They prop that in with large rocks. There's so much construction going on here, twigs and everything, and that helps to shore up the dam, and it starts to do its job. It creates that beaver pond. And then the next task is to build their lodge, their lodgings. Now this again is constructed out of all the branches that they cut down, and they pile this great big mound. They put tinier twigs in there, they pack mud in it, so it becomes a really solid structure and well insulated as well. And then finally, once they've done all that, they swim underwater and they excavate a tunnel, so an entrance and exit hole into that lodge. They excavate further into it. They create a chamber over here where they feed and they dry off, and then another chamber up here, like an upstairs, downstairs, and up here is where they groom and they sleep and they nuzzle. Lots of social behavior goes on over there. So really comfy abode for them. But of course, we're not going to just leave you with an illustration. We went down there when it was daylight to show you the real thing. So this is a beaver lodge. This is what they construct, and this is the same beaver lodge where we herd those kits that were born here in the spring. The beavers will be holed up in there right now because they're nocturnal animals, so during the day they're resting in there. But as night falls, they will exit the lodge via an underwater exit hole, and it's quite a spectacular sound when you hear them go. It sounds like a great big toilet being unblocked, and that's when you know they're off and they're out there foraging and getting busy for the night. Aside from finding whatever they can at this time of year, they have an underwater larder, and that has been stocked up right through the autumn, and they will keep accessing that, and that will keep them going through the winter. So this whole construction, the dams that create this beaver pond, is here to create deep enough water so that even in the winter, if the surface freezes, they can still access all these key things, and crucially their larder, under the free-flowing water. Amazing bit of engineering. So the one thing I couldn't see easily because it was underwater was that larder I was talking about. So we've done a little representation here, and essentially it's very simple really. They take the sticks and the twigs that they gather up and they drive them into the soft mud in the riverbed there, and that keeps it in place so that over the winter they can keep diving down to that and getting the food they need. They might even replenish it and restock it if they can, but that is their crucial food stash that gets them through the winter. So what do they store under there? Well, in the spring, we got to see the beavers out in the daylight, because with the longer days, it meant that it was bright late into the evening. We got to see them foraging and taking all kinds of vegetation. These are herbivores, so they will take water plants, they'll eat the leaves of trees like willows and birch. But, of course, now it's winter. A lot of this is happening under the cover of darkness. There's not many plants out and trees and leaf, so they'll be taking saplings and shrub, but they're also, take a look at this, they are stripping the bark off some of these branches and trees. Now, this is one where you can see they have meticulously stripped the bark off this one here. But it's not actually the bark that they're eating. They're actually going for the soft cambium just underneath the bark. Now, I'm sure you can imagine this isn't the easiest stuff to digest. So they've got a community of microorganisms, a bit like us. We have friendly gut bacteria. Well, they have loads of microorganisms that help to break down this plant material. Up to 30% of their food is broken down by the microbes, and that really helps to digest this cellulose, that really tough plant cell lining. So beavers have this incredible habitat, but alongside them are fish. Now, the irony is the beavers don't eat the fish, but other things do. Now, occasionally when predators corral and surround the fish, they start to form something called a bait ball. Now, people familiar with bait balling behavior tend to associate it with the kind of thing that happens out at sea. But self-titled fish twitcher, Jack Perks, he decided he wanted to film a bait ball, but not out at sea. He went to a reservoir in the East Midlands.
This is Rutland, the smallest historic county in England and home to Rutland Water Reservoir. By area, it's the largest man-made reservoir in Britain. And in early winter, cameraman Jack Perks is irresistibly drawn to its shallows.
I've been doing this for 5 years now. Come every year, it's almost like an annual pilgrimage.
He's here to see fish, thousands of them. Very young roach and perch. Now, they were born in the summer. They're around 2 inches long now, but they're very vulnerable. The man-made bottom of the lake is about as featureless as a Dust Bowl prairie. There's absolutely no shelter and very few places to hide for these small fry. Safety lies, therefore, in sticking together, and they start to gather in large groups. Soon, they become united into a super shoal. In a good year, it can be the size of a tennis court. Jack has got his fingers crossed for big numbers.
I'm just going to bung my polarisers on, see through the glare of the water. Now, some years can be better than others. So there's a... Whoa! That's incredible. That's absolutely bonkers. It's thick with the roach. Wasn't ready for that.
This multitude is known as a bait ball because, well, they're bait for a host of local predators. Bounty hunters like cormorants and grebes, sharpshooters like herons, egrets, and occasionally kingfishers, all trying to take their slice of the bait ball. But the real action is going on beneath the water.
Oh, look at that! It's like a torpedo. Never get tired of seeing that. That's incredible.
Hungry trout. They're devastating hunters. Jack has rounded up a posse of 6 cameras to catch them in the act.
Got fish cam. To be honest, my arts and crafts skills are not particularly brilliant. Let's see what the trout think of it anyway.
And he's not stopping there. He wants a closer look at the action, so this year he's going in with them. The water is very cold, but that's kind of the point. It's the first frost that helps trigger this gold rush. You see, the colder days kill off all the beetles and the flies which the trout eat in the summer, so then these trout turn to a more fishy diet. It's Jack's first real close-up view of the bait ball. It's about 5 feet thick, with roach at the top and perch at the bottom, pursued by Jack and, of course, by hungry trout.
Trout are sight feeders, and because during the winter that kills off all the algae, it means the water's clearer. This really gets them going as they can spot that bait ball, smash straight into it.
Being so close to the action, it's possible to see how the trout hunt in packs, with one launching itself at the shoal.
That triggers the others into an absolute feeding frenzy. They'll then come back round because the sheer force of these trout hitting them stuns some of the small fish and they'll pick off the stragglers.
Watching the high-energy show above, the pike lie patiently in the depths below.
I'm not as graceful as the fish, but they're absolutely everywhere. They're these huge trout. You can see that eye looking at them with this intent they want to eat them. It's incredible. I've got to get back to it.
It's been a successful mission for Jack, seeing one of Britain's biggest freshwater bait balls better than ever before. We don't know if next year's will be an even bigger spectacle, but we do know one thing, that Jack will be here once again to find out.
It has finally stopped raining here in mid-Wales. And up on the high ground, we've got a sprinkling of snow. Not much, but just enough to remind us that it is winter. Isn't that fantastic? Hallelujah, dry at last. And if you've been watching all week, you'll know that we've been following the wildlife up on the River Ness in Scotland. And as yet, we haven't had a bait ball, but over the past 24 hours, the landscape really has changed. It's become incredibly wintry and very beautiful too. But because of all the rain we've had and because some of the snow is already starting to melt, that's causing a few problems. Not for the wildlife, but for our cameramen. Al and Lindsay have been sticking out cameras above and below the water there. And it's been very difficult with the current running as it is. Not a problem for the fish, of course. They've seen this many times before. And if you were watching yesterday, you will know that we've seen an otter on the River Ness come out onto the bank and eating a fish. And of course, where you get spawning fish, inevitably you are going to attract predators. And one of these is the cormorant. And this is what they filmed just yesterday. Cormorant with an enormous salmon. You think it's never going to get that down, but it does. The beak opens wide, it's got this elasticated gullet, and down it goes. Absolutely amazing birds. And I'm pleased to say it's not one of our salmon, the salmon we have been following. Amazing, aren't they? Amazing birds, those cormorants. Let's have a look at the physique of the salmon, because as the fish come from seawater to freshwater, their body shape changes. Now I'm going to concentrate on the male because the change is most dramatic there. Come over here with me. This is what they look like in seawater, a streamlined silvery fish. Then they're coming into freshwater, and bear in mind that they're leaving a calcium-rich environment here and they're going to a very malnutritional, calcium-poor area here. And also remember that salmon in freshwater, they don't feed at all, and yet they have to prepare for the spawning to fertilize the eggs. How do they do this? Well, they reabsorb parts of their own skeleton, parts of the vertebra, even some of the scales, because they're drawing the calcium out to rebuild the skull. Major changes here at the front end. The biggest one of all is this. The lower jaw becomes hooked. This is called a kype, and it's even got an indentation in the top jaw there for that kype to fit in and for the mouth to shut. Incredible, incredible fish. So why do they have this kype? Well, the simple answer is to fight. They use it when they arrive on the spawning grounds. In a healthy river, it's going to be crowded. Lots of cocks and hens, lots of males and females, so they have to fight to get the right to fertilize the female's eggs. Look at this. Here we are on the spawning grounds, on the nest, males and females, a huge male there. Not just shadowing females, but also fighting to keep the other males away. It's all about passing your genes on to the next generation. Big male with a female, chaperoning her and keeping another male at bay there. Stunning footage. But I'm going to replay that last bit again. I want you to watch this and listen as well. Hear that snap there? That click? That's the male using his kype. He uses it to fight and as a noise to ward off other males. Well, the more you learn about salmon, the more you realise they are fantastic fish. And don't forget, we have live cameras up there, so keep your eyes on them. It's better than any soap opera, I absolutely guarantee you. Well, down to the New Forest again, to Chris and Megs, who are looking at nests, not below the water, but above it.
That's right, Iolo. Best time of year for probably finding nest easily, because all the leaves have disappeared off of the trees and they do stick out like sore thumbs. So I went for a bit of a ramble the other day, just along the lane behind us here, and here is what I found. Today I'm on location to look at birds' homes under the hammer of winter, when all the leaves have come off the trees and they've been laid bare. So I'm going to stick my nose through the avian keyhole and into this nest. But whose nest was this? I'll give you some clues. It's got a thick, grassy base to it, and then it's got a mud cup, which was also lined inside with grass, into which a clutch of 4, 5, sometimes even 6 pale green eggs, heavily speckled with tan, were laid. What do you think? Whose avian home was this? Well, the answer is that it was a blackbird's nest. Nest number 1. Okay, our next treehouse nest. I have to say, it's a double delight, because now 2 species have been using this particular treehouse. So which 2 species are they? I'll give you some clues. Well, when it started life as a nest, it was rugby ball shaped, lined with grass, and there the birds laid a clutch of pale blue, speckled with olive and grey eggs. But those birds have long gone, and there's now a squatter in the nest. Its appearance has changed too. Look at this. It's filled with leaves to make a winter shelter for a very familiar species. So what do you think then? Which bird built the nest, and who is squatting in it now? This was built by magpies. The magpies have long gone. So who's in here at the moment? Well, that cosy ball of leaves is probably keeping a grey squirrel nice and warm, because it's used the magpie nest as a base for its winter dray. I've saved the very best till last. And this is a nest that I've been watching intently all year. So, who lives here? It's a large nest, and you can tell even from here that it's a flat nest. And I'll give you one last clue. In the breeding season, these nests are decorated with sprigs of greenery, normally from a coniferous tree. So, what do you think? Well, if it were that diameter, it would be a sparrowhawk's nest, but it's not. It's that diameter. This is the nest of the goshawk, the avian terminator of the woodlands, the most powerful bird predator that we have in this part of the New Forest. And this is its home. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes, a couple of extra yeses. We're very lucky down here in the New Forest, as we have a healthy population of goshawks here, perhaps up to 30, maybe even 40 pairs.
We do, and it's fantastic to see. And I have to say, I love that BT, because I learned so much about nests, but I also really enjoyed that funky music. It was quite good fun.
Easily pleased.
Now, when you're out, of course, you might be seeing a lot of nests for yourself, and there might be something that's catching your eye, but you might be mistaken, because, of course, witch's broom is something that's often thought of as a nest, but in fact, it is not at all. So here is what it looks like, and essentially it is a growth distortion from woody plants, namely trees. So leaves and branches intertwine together when unwanted microorganisms cause a little bit of stress, and that is what we're seeing at the tops of those trees. I mean, I haven't seen any around here recently.
No.
Have you spotted?
No, we don't have any around here. I was looking out for it when I was, looking for those nests, so I could make that distinction that you've highlighted, but I couldn't find any. But actually, I'm just getting in my ear that the one and only Iolo Williams is, of course, surrounded by witch's broom, and he's probably got one. Iolo.
Yes, here I am. Look at the smug look on my face now. During lockdown, I've started up a new industry selling witches' brooms. I've seen the Packham bank account, and I reckon, 200 notes in tens in a plain brown envelope, and this will be in the post here.
I'll tell you something, you can get that on an internet auction site 9:15 tonight. It'll be a lot less than 200 notes in a brown paper envelope, I can tell you. Thanks very much, Iolo.
Right, I'm gonna stop it there because you two will carry on for ages. Now, of course, this witch's broom is something you might be out seeing on your daily exercise, and do keep a look out for it because it might be something you could add to your winter watch list. And now lots of you have been going out on your walks and you've been sending us some fantastic images that we have been taking a look at. Have a look at this one. This is a muntjac deer on a bench. Yes, on a bench. Look at that. It's quite sweet, isn't it?
Can I just say, muntjac deer are actually quite small, so that's got to be a very small bench.
Yeah, it must be a very tiny bench. And this is a gold crest, of course. This was sent in to us by Ailish. It's a beautiful bird surrounded by snow. And Chris, I know you're going to love this next one. Are you ready for this?
Go on.
A male bullfinch.
My goodness me, look at that! That's a stonker, isn't it?
It is. It is a
beautiful
stunning
photograph,
really
framed on the left-hand side. No feet, don't like feet, too much detail. Hidden by the snow. I'll tell you what, hold my cards.
Oh,
it's got to be worth it. Oh, male bullfinch in the snow. Come on.
Wow, that's a good reaction, isn't it?
Hey.
Well, you're quite excited. I think you need a breather after that.
Yeah,
in fact, I think we all could do with a bit of a breather, a bit of tranquility, a bit of beauty and a bit of calm. So be transported to the tranquil forest of Dean, filmed by Max Smith. Take a look at this.
Beautiful. The light bleeding through the trees, the snorting boar echoing through those glades. Absolutely fantastic. And a great way to end tonight's programme, because I'm afraid we've run out of time. What are we up to tomorrow? Well, I'm going on a nocturnal safari. I've been out in the woods behind me with my thermal camera, picking up all of those animals in the dark.
And I'll be taking a deep dive to learn all about the habits of our humpback whales.
And I'll be looking at a flock of rare geese that come down to the Dovey Valley every winter.
So plenty coming up tomorrow, of course. If you can't wait until then, remember you can watch those cameras 10 till 10. Lots of activity, as you've seen. We've got mice, we've got badgers, we've got salmon, and even those otters as well. If you do get any pictures or videos whilst you're out on your winter walks, we'd love to send them to us. Send them to Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. We'll have a look through. And if they're as good as that bullfinch, we'll put them on air tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Oh, yes, yes.